I think the best advice that we got was you cannot save face and save your life at the same time.
Greetings, y'all, and welcome to See Things Above TV. I'm your host, Lou Ciccone. So today we're taking a quick look at this latest podcast from Laura Lentz. Okay, so this is the former pastor of Hillsong NYC, and we all know about his story. We're going to get into that in a little bit, but if y'all like content like this, y'all know what to do. Like, share, and subscribe. Ring the bell for notifications. Just do all the stuff that lets YouTube know that you like content like this, all right? So let's hop right into this, y'all. So for a little bit of background, Laura Lentz is the former pastor of Hillsong NYC, and in 2020, we heard about what happened between him and, his extramarital affairs with a lady from, New York as well, and that was very public, and the humiliation and everything that came with it was very public as well. He had a very well-publicized fall from grace. With all that being said, they've just released this new podcast on the B-Side Network. Now, I wasn't even aware that this was an actual network, but the B-Side also houses Tim Ross's stuff as well. And so I guess this is now a new podcast on that brand. So this is the Lights On podcast from Laura Lentz. We're going to check out a few short clips, and I'll give you my thoughts on it. And I think you'll actually be surprised when you check out what is going on in this podcast. So let's dive into it right now.
So, I wanted to ask you some questions.
Yes, ma'am.
That I think people want to know, especially because, I was telling you about this, but you kind of 3 years ago, stuff happened. You apologized publicly, and then we disappeared. Mm-hmm. And so I think a lot of people are like, what's happened? Like, they probably have a lot of things that they think about you and things that they've seen in the media, things that people have talked about that we haven't answered. Mm-hmm. So I think maybe you talking about, if I ask you the questions and then you
perfect
answer, could be fun.
Yeah, perfect. Yes.
Okay. So why do you think we waited so long, or why did you wait so long to talk?
We waited so long to talk because we had a bigger priority, which was to save our family. More accurately, for me to save my own life and then work to try to save our marriage and then work to try to save our family. And very difficult because my instinct is to go to war immediately.
Right.
My instinct is to defend myself, give context, give clarity. And the way all that went down, we had to make a choice right up front. Which way are we going to handle this chapter? And for me and you, I think the best advice that we got was you cannot save face and save your life at the same time. And I remember hearing that going, well, that doesn't work for me because I want to salvage my reputation. I want to tell people what happened. I want to do all this stuff. And I need to get in a place of healing because I am in deep, deep trouble. And I remember we chose healing over reputation protection. It's very difficult, wasn't easy, but the healthier we got, the better it got.
So one of the first things that I saw as I watched this interview is how contrite he really seems to be in the statements that he's making. And he said some powerful things if we think about it, where he's talking about, hey, like the statement that you cannot save face and save your life at the same time. That is so true. If you're in a situation where you were such a public figure, somebody who was so well known, somebody who a lot of people looked up to, and you go through this situation, like you have so many eyes on you. And if you're fighting for your reputation, above all else, you're fighting for your reputation, then what really matters is not going to stand the test of time. What really matters is not going to withstand that storm, I should say. It's not going to withstand that storm. And he recognized early that what really matters was his family. And I'm glad that he had that inclination. Your reputation does not matter more than the state of your soul matters. You know what I'm saying? Your reputation is nothing compared to the state of your soul, compared to having salvation and being restored to Christ. Your reputation, your riches, your public standing, or the way people perceive you, all that stuff is nothing compared to actually being in a right relationship with God and being restored. And after an event like this right here was the right approach for him to take. And I was very impressed by that portion of it and that sort of overall theme that you see within this podcast.
How do you heal if you're always moving, if you're always fighting, if you're always swinging? How in the world can you ever figure out what's wrong with you?
Right.
And I'm so glad, I'm grateful. I didn't get it at the time. I hated it at the time. It was so hard. But now I look back, and if I would have spent any time defending myself or trying to figure out some way to salvage our image, there's no way I would have been able to get help because I would have focused on that.
We've been really quiet for the most part. We did do the Hulu documentary.
That's all.
That's all we did. Do you regret doing that? Would you have changed it in terms of like feeling like we were maybe a bit too soon or like shouldn't have said it? I don't know. What do you think?
We had so many opportunities to do interviews. And I remember thinking after we got through that first season, I remember thinking, I don't know when we're ever going to be able to speak on this. The right time will come. And we were approached about the documentary. I don't know if I would do it again. I think my motive was to feel understood.
Yeah.
That's, if I'm honest, that's why we did it.
Yeah.
And that's never a good motive. Like my overriding thing, I said other things. I was like, we can do it for this, we want to do it for that. But if I really, really search my own soul, we did that so people would understand. What I realized afterwards is that it's not going to work. It doesn't matter. There are people who are not, they don't want to understand. And there's people who do want to understand. We can't change their minds. I can't change anybody's minds. So I look back, I wouldn't change. I wouldn't regret it because I didn't know then. I thought this is going to be an objective documentary, which isn't ever going to happen. I think that the producers tried to be as honest as they could with it, but we didn't control it.
We didn't know what they were putting it. We didn't know who they were talking to or what any of it was about. We just knew that our story was going to be like an overarching situation.
And it was going to be left alone because we had said we don't want our story to be attached to a narrative about how somebody else is bad or whatever.
Yeah.
And you know what? People made it what they wanted to make it. But I learned in that moment of watching people talk about us, some stuff was true. A lot of it's not true, which we could talk about. But I know for myself, the thing that I realize is if you don't want for people to lie about you, don't put yourself in a position to be lied about.
Right.
And I started pointing to myself. I'm going, you know what? Yeah, the lies are hard because what I did do was bad enough to just talk about that. But it's the stuff that, was thrown on in the middle of that. And I went from being mad and bitter to going, it's my fault.
So it was definitely interesting to get his thoughts on the Hulu docuseries that they did. And obviously that was really more about Hillsong and Hillsong culture than it really was about Carl Lentz. I think he was just kind of at the center of it. And, there were other people involved. And I'm sure, him and his wife, there's no way of knowing who was going to speak and who was going to be involved in the interview. So maybe they took exception to, or maybe they don't agree with some of the statements that were made by other folks. However, the goal of that documentary was to give us an insight into what is going on in Hillsong as a quote unquote church culture, right? Because there's just so much things that were wrong starting from the top, right? The leadership, the way things were being handled. There was a culture of abuse that seemed to be getting swept under the rug. There was also just this celebrity lifestyle, this opulent lifestyle, which people were living, these pastors were living, and it was just out of control. So I think really the documentary was more about that, and he felt that it was an opportunity for him to be understood, but that didn't come across the way he wanted to. And hey, that's just how that goes sometimes. That's how that goes. And I still think, in a sense, he still came out as, more of a sympathetic figure, because I remember watching it myself and feeling as though, okay, so he did some things. He obviously did things wrong that he owned up to, but he was also part of an environment that really sort of fostered and allowed those things to happen and even promoted some really toxic behavior. That's also really interesting because I think that in general, people just hearing about him even doing this podcast have that disposition. Like there's a few people coming to this and watching this with a level of suspicion, even now, like seeing what is going on with him and seeing him be transparent with him and his wife and talk about their, situation, there's still a level of suspicion that people have as to what is, like, how genuine is all of this. However, I think what we shouldn't lose is that as Christians, we should be people who actually celebrate stories of redemption. I'll admit to even having some skepticism myself as I approach this podcast, but when I watched it, man, I think it's just good to be honest and balanced about these things and be able to say, hey, from what I'm seeing here, there's actually a lot that I liked about this first episode, and hopefully things move in a direction where this is what we get more of. And as he talks to different people, it doesn't turn into something else. But my initial thoughts on the podcast are definitely positive, and hoping for this to be possibly a moment, one of the rare moments where we actually see a pastor who really made some terrible mistakes, committed some terrible sins against his family, and against his church and against the people he served, and ultimately against God in the public eye, who has come back with a real biblical perspective on these matters. And it is a perspective that ultimately points to God and doesn't make him look like the hero of the story. So I'm hoping that is what we see as we watch more episodes of this podcast. With all that being said, y'all, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I would love to hear from y'all. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Tell a friend to tell a friend. And if then you have been raised with Christ, seek the things that are above, where Christ is, seated at the right hand of God. Set your minds on things that are above, not on things that are on earth. All right? God bless y'all, and I'll see y'all on the next one. Peace.